Hey everyone, my name's Lucas Martin. I'm our business development manager here at ARC Advisory Group. I'm joined here with Tim Shea, one of our senior analysts. Tim actually just recently wrapped up a market study on drone inspection services. So I wanted to set up some time with him to share a little bit more detail about this research. Tim, thanks a lot for the time today. Can you explain a little bit just about the scope of research that went into producing a study like this?
Sure, because our market analysis report we conducted on drone inspection services is really focused on companies that are providing a third-party service. So a company can either adopt a drone operations internally, or they can outsource it to a third party. In essence, these are drone service providers. And what these drone service providers are, typically they'll rely on a third-party drone, such as a manufacturer, such as DJI or some other manufacturer. In some cases, a few of them offer their own drones to provide the service, but typically it's a third-party relationship. And what they do is they provide a service which basically goes out and they plan the missions, fly the missions, which would involve collecting various data on inspections or surveying and mapping or other applications that may be of interest to the customer. And they collect the data, analyze the data, and then they provide the necessary reporting of the data to the customer. And they do this across a number of industries, including traditional ARC process industries like chemicals and oil and gas and refining and pulp and paper and mining. But we're also looking at other industries such as construction, government, which is really infrastructure inspections for roads and bridges and things like that. We're also looking at telecommunications towers, and the transportation logistics, which is really ports and terminals. And they're doing that across a number of applications, and the major ones are obviously inspections, leak detection, surveying, mapping, inventory management, which is typically found in mining and pulp and paper, and then progress monitoring, which could be across construction and some other applications where they're actually monitoring the progress of a project, typically a greenfield project.
Yeah, and thanks for touching on some of those applications in different markets. Can you give me just like a brief idea as to what the supplier landscape looks like in this market?
Sure, there's a number of different companies, but I'll highlight some of the top handful of companies. Companies like Aerodyne, Cyberhawk, Connexicor, TerraDrone, and Precision Hawk. And all these companies have their various strengths, but typically the common thread is they either have their own large team of pilots and experienced inspectors, and or they have a data management platform, which basically can be customized for various segments, such as solar panels, wind turbines, pipelines, things like that. So they'll have these specific data management platforms that helps them to collect the data, analyze the data, and provide the reporting to the customer as a differentiator for their services. Some of the up and coming players that we want to sort of highlight quickly would be companies like Percepto and their autonomous drone in the box solution, and their asset inspection and monitoring AIM platform, and a company called Hala Sky, HHLA Sky, which is based out of Hamburg, and they're part of the parent companies that sort of operating the Hamburg port and terminals in that area.
Can you talk about maybe some of the key growth or success factors you might have uncovered?
Sure. Well, the major reasons for the growth is really, it's the same ones that is driving the overall growth and demand and adoption of drones itself. It's the key factor is employee safety. So we're finding that companies are looking out at applications where they, having employees climb a smokestack or a chimney or something like that, hundreds of feet in the air, or providing harder access areas or confined spaces is where they're really starting off and leveraging drone usage. And obviously the service providers are focusing in those areas. But we're also finding as the functionality and performance of the drones themselves improves through automated autonomous operations, machine vision, AI, machine learning, and things like that, and the enhanced sensor payloads of collecting the data, the ability to provide a better quality and more cost-effective service has been improving. And lastly, one of the key factors we found is the pandemic had a double-edged sword. It obviously impacted a lot of companies adversely, but it also really highlighted the need for remote operations and getting the employees out of these certainly situational areas where it's dangerous and things like that. So those are some of the real key drivers that we saw.
Thanks a lot for touching on that. And kind of on the flip side, maybe just briefly talk about one or two growth inhibiting factors you might have experienced or found or recovered during this research.
Sure. Well, the biggest one by far is the fact that this is again, we talked in the beginning, these are third-party companies that an end user will outsource their drone inspection services and things like that to this company. So the biggest inhibitor potentially would be the end users, in some cases, increasingly deciding to take the operations in-house. A lot of the companies we found, particularly the smaller ones, they find they're not in the drone business, so they want to outsource it to a company where they can just pay as they go for their inspectional needs and things like that. So that's probably the biggest inhibitor right now, I think.
So if I'm an asset owner or a technology end user, what strategies would you recommend to a buyer of a system like this?
Right. Well, often we find that typically the companies that are relying on the drone service providers are companies that are just starting out. So again, if they're just starting out, I would go back to the situation was find those applications where employee safety is paramount. Okay, so that would be the first one to focus on, and making sure that they pick out those type of applications where the sort of soft ROI can be really proven. The other one, importantly to remember, is to review specific operational requirements with your drone service provider to make sure that they're choosing the right drone, whether it's a multi-rotor or a fixed wing, depending on the application and distance requirements, what type of sensor payloads, what kind of information, data are they going to be collecting, what are the pilot and inspector qualifications. So really trying to work with these guys to make sure that the service they're providing is what you're going to need, and importantly, can be scalable.
And just lastly, like any other kind of key trends or points you'd like to share, or could you touch upon maybe some of the potential prospects or buyers of this market study, how they could benefit from this?
Sure. I think the most important one I think is really fascinating is that the traditional model of a drone service provider relying on either their own in-house pilots and inspectors, or there may be a contract. They have a pilot network of number of pilots in, say, across the United States or whatever the case may be. We're finding that as companies are enhancing the autonomous capabilities of these drones through all the things we talked about, AI and machine vision and things like that, and the fact that the regulatory bodies such as the FAA are finally starting to catch up with and dealing with the issue of what they call beyond visual line of sight waivers. And traditionally in the past, they've been very much site specific, so that you're limited to one mission at a time. And so that's, doing that approval process is very onerous, and they're very difficult to get. They only give out less than 5% of those that are applied for. So the biggest advancements I see is in the area of autonomous flight and the ability for the drone itself to go off without the need of a pilot or even perhaps an inspector to collect the data, analyze the data, and do the reporting itself. So I think that's one of the biggest key trends that's going to be impacting the opportunity that can be provided by these
And can you just briefly touch on what buyers of something like this, or how they could benefit from purchasing a market study like this, Tim?
Great question. So basically, if you're a user of drones, or particularly looking for a drone service provider, you're going to find out who are the leading providers, what are their focus areas in terms of regions, industries, and applications. So it'll give you a pretty good idea as to where to start off with your short list. If you're a service provider yourself, you can understand the competitive landscape, the market opportunity, what industries and applications perhaps you should maybe better focus your resources to get a better return on your investment. And lastly, if you're a drone supplier, you may want to learn who are the key service providers that you can work with, because in many cases, a good customer of a drone supplier is the service providers, because they take those drones and provide the service that would be done for the customer. So it's those are really the key drivers, I think, of the research.
Thanks a lot for the time, Tim. Obviously, I know you spent a ton of time and effort and resources on producing such a good market study like this. And just real quick for the audience, we just barely scratched the surface of detail that's included in this report, and also just barely scratched some of the benefits you could get. Below in the video description, we'll have links to our website, www.arcweb.com, and then a link to the press release for this study. Please contact us to get more information about this. We'd love to have those conversations. And thanks a lot for the time, Tim. Have a great rest of your day.